certainly our privilege to be together and to worship, to study. I'd like for us to go through our readings fairly briefly. Our readings would take us from chapter 9 down through 17 of the book of Matthew. We pointed out that Matthew emphasizes what about Jesus overall? His kingdom, that's right. And he's the king. He's the fulfillment of Old Testament expectation. He gives really from chapter 4 through 14, parts of 14, most of the work in Galilee is dealt with, or at least a good bit of it. And we have the Sermon on the Mount in 5, 6, and 7. And we mentioned Sunday morning that in chapters 8 and 9, we have a number of miracles that showed he had the power or the authority to speak as he did. They were astounded because he spoke as one having authority, not as a scribe. And so Matthew records a number of these various miracles to verify the fact that he had that authority. In the end of 9, though, he sees the multitude as sheep without what? A shepherd. And so he tells the disciples to pray that pray that the Lord of harvest will send forth laborers into his harvest. And so in chapter 10 we have the giving of the what? The limited commission. It's limited and called the limited commission because the apostles were limited to go to only the Jews, not the Samaritans or the villages of Gentiles, but the Jews. And some of the persecution that they could expect to see, Jesus warns them about. I would say that there are some aspects of the limited commission that are catapulted over into the Great Commission. You'll be standing before kings and synagogues and so Sanhedrin. Well, all of those things that some of those things, at least, they did not occur until the Great Commission, but most of it here on the limited commission. In chapter 11, there were different. What happens to John? He's not yet. He's been. What was that, Patty?
I said, you're right. I read about today where he was being killed.
Yeah, in 14. Yeah. He's put in prison, and we have differing views toward John and Jesus. They thought John was, mistaken, and Jesus couldn't be the Messiah. He associates with sinners, and so then Jesus answers some of that in the end of 11. We have the so-called Great Invitation in 11:28. Come unto me, all ye that what? Labor and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. We just don't have time to put all of it in context. In 12, there's a series of things that began. Well, hostility really is ramped up because Jesus violates what they think are Sabbath laws. And so Jesus deals with that. And then he mentions in 38 through 40 the fact that when some of them would say, he just performed earlier a triple miracle on a fellow. And as they said, we would see a sign from you, and said that Jesus answered, there's not going to be any sign given this generation except the sign of Jonah. And so as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and nights, so must the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth. Of course, he spoke of what? His resurrection from the dead. 13 is about when Jesus begins to speak in parables. Right. In 14 and 15, I used to tell young people, if you can think that there are differing opinions of the king, Herod thought he was who? 14:2. John the Baptist, raised from the dead. And then Jesus walked on water, and the disciples recognized he's the Son of God. In the end of 14, they're bringing people, when Jesus comes across the sea and he comes to the coast, they bring people who are sick. He's the great physician. And then in chapter 15, they think, he's the violator of what? Traditions. And then we have the feeding of the the 5,000, the 4,000. And then in 16, he goes into the parts of Caesarea Philippi, and there he announces that he would establish his what? His church. Right. Upon this rock I will build my church. And yet he also said for the very first time in plain language in verse 21 that he had to go to Jerusalem and suffer many things of the chief priest and be killed and the third day be raised. And Peter says what? No, that's not going to ever happen. And Jesus rebuffs or rebukes Peter. And then, though he stated that he's going to have to die, he also says he would be raised. But to give evidently, perhaps even himself, courage and confidence that these things will happen, in 17 he takes Peter, James, and John up on a high mountain, and what happens? He's transfigured. Face did shine as the sun, his garments became white as the light. And that's when the Lord, or God, the Father, said from the clouds, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Hear ye him." And so then they come back and come back down the mountain, and Jesus tells them not to tell this vision until the Son of Man be raised. At the end, it come back toward Capernaum. It's an interesting. I was asked about this a few days ago. There's an interesting thing. They've been arguing about who's going to be greatest. Mark's the point there. And they're coming back, and they're in Capernaum. And somebody comes to Peter and says, "Does your master pay the half shekel, which was a temple tax?" And then Jesus gives a little story about the kings of the earth, their sons. Do they have to pay? No. And he said, "Well, I don't either, basically, but in order to keep somebody from stumbling, you go and throw your hook in the water, out comes a fish, it's a shekel in its mouth, pay for you and for me." And then the 18th chapter deals primarily with the idea of, we talked about this Sunday night, in fact, the idea of causing people to stumble. And so the whole chapter really is about that. Okay. Comment or question? Anybody? All right. Well, if not, then let's move on to Acts 17. Acts 17. We're come to what city? Now, what is it, Sister Janet? Well, that's right, Thessalonica, and then Berea, and then we come to Athens. Right. Okay. So here's our chart. We've been studying through. Want to remember to the best of our ability what we've studied before. I've told you before, and just to remind you, I thought it was kind of a brilliant idea about what I heard Brother Ed Holt used to teach down in Montgomery. He would really encourage people in his class to what he called study behind. Don't necessarily study it so much ahead as to study behind. Just keep reviewing yourself where it's just, you just have it cemented in your mind. But I trust you're doing that. In the 13th to 28th chapter, Paul's work primarily, 13 and 14, the first journey, we want to remember in southern Galatia and the Isle of Cyprus. 15, the conference in Jerusalem, and 1536 through 1822, the second journey. And we haven't gotten there yet, but the majority of Paul's time that we have recorded will be spent in what city? Brother Gene?
I'm sorry.
What city? Corinth. And so that's where we are now. So remember the emphasis of each chapter: 16, the conversions of Lydia, the jailer; 17, Thessalonica, Berea, and Athens; 18, primarily Corinth. And we remember we leave Antioch, pick up Timothy in Lystra, and then somebody in Troas. Who is it? Luke. Good. And then we have sailed through Samothrace to Neapolis, and then we come to Philippi, and then we have the conversions of Lydia and the jailer, and then they likely travel the Ignatian way to Thessalonica. We talked about that, and we talked about Thessalonica and some of the connections there. Then to Berea, And at Berea, they were more noble than those in Thessalonica from the point of view that they searched the scriptures daily, whether those things were so. We talked about that Sunday morning. And then from Berea, there were actually people, Jews, who came from Thessalonica stirring up problems. And so they wanted to get Paul out. And so they sent Paul down to Athens. And that's where we are, approximately 250 miles from Berea. And what we're studying tonight, he preached in the synagogue, then the marketplace, and then they took him up to the Areopagus. And we have the speech on Mars Hill, one of the most famous speeches, I suppose, anywhere. Okay, let's read. Let's just read some. Acts 17. We finished up all of our questions, the best I remember. We finished up on page 31 of our booklets. And let's just read now. Well, I'll tell you what let's do. Let's look at the note here, then we'll read. The note on page 31. Leaving Berea meant leaving Macedonia and traveling south to Achaia, the Roman name for Greece. During this time, Corinth was the capital and chief city, but Athens retained its fame as philosophical and cultural center of the Roman world. The golden age of Athens had passed. It had reached its zenith 5 centuries before Christ, when it produced its great philosophy, art, and literature. Athens was located 5 miles northeast of the Saronic Gulf in the Aegean. Its seaport was Piraeus, and connecting these two cities was a road about 2 miles long, which ran between two walls approximately 200 yards apart. Greek writers state that many altars were built along this road. It's been stated by many historians that there were more idols than there were people in the city of Athens. Athens circled the base of the Acropolis, a hill 500 feet high on which numerous temples were built, including the Parthenon. North of the Acropolis was the Agora, or marketplace, where Athenians would transact business and argue philosophy. On the western approach to the Acropolis was Mars Hill, or the Areopagus. The latter name is that of the city court of Athens, which met at Mars Hill on certain occasions to pass judgment on matters that pertained to the welfare of the city. Whereas Jerusalem had been the hub where people built their lives around God's revelation, Athens, Greece was the hub where people built their lives around philosophy and human wisdom. All right, with that in mind, let's begin our reading in 17, verses 16 down through 21. 17, 16 through 21. Paula, would you like to read for us? Acts 17, 16 through 21.
Now, while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons, and in the market daily with them that met with him. Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics encountered him, and some said, "What will this babbler say?" Others, he seemed to be setter forth of strange gods because we preach unto Jesus and the resurrection. How far did you say?
21 through 21.
And they took him and brought him unto
Areopagus.
Thank you. Saying, may we know what this new doctrine whereof thou speakest is. For thou bringest certain strange things to our ears. We know therefore what these things mean. For the Athenians and strangers which were there spent their time in nothing else, but either to tell or to hear some new thing.
All right, thank you, Paula. So as Paul, verse 16, is going to the city, he waited for them in Athens. He's in the city. His spirit is provoked. It's just, I can't believe these people are doing this, all these idols. And can you just imagine, Lee and I were talking about this earlier today, and she mentioned it's hard for us to picture how something would have been that way. And she mentioned that, and it's not exactly a parallel, we know that, but I don't know if any of you have been on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. I have. I didn't buy anything, but but you go and you just see every kind of imaginable wickedness and way out people. It's crazy. And you think, this whole section, they need the gospel in a bad way. And you think here is Athens, and on this road that's described here in the note, that you have idols to all kinds of gods, and so it provoked Paul, and he reasoned with people. First among the Jews, where? Verse 17. In the synagogue, as was his usual custom, with the Jews and the devout persons. And then also the what every day? The marketplace. And the marketplace, or the agora, there were certain of these Stoic and Epicurean philosophers that he encountered. And they said, well, he's just a seed picker. He's just a babbler. And that's in the notes. And so finally they said, we want you to give a speech. We want you to lecture to us about more so than what. So they took him up on the hill where some business transactions would be encountered. And the city council would meet. And then Paul began to speak. And we have his speech here in verses 22 down through verse 31. Kate, would you like to read that for us? 22 through 31. I won't break it up, though you can break it up into sections. But go ahead, 22 through 31.
And Paul stood in the midst of his Areopagus, and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For I was passing through and considered the objects of your worship. I even found an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God. Therefore the one whom you worship without knowing him, I proclaim to you. God who made the world and everything in it. Since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed time in the boundaries of their dwelling, so that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and we have our being, as also some of your own poets. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, something sharply shaped by art and man's devising. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now command all men everywhere to repent. You said to 32?
31.
31.
Through 31.
Because he has appointed a day on which he would judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. He has given assurance of this to all by raising him from the dead.
All right. If you just look at the whole of the speech, he starts by talking about whom? The God that made the world. God created. God was here before the world was. We pointed that out in chapter 14. Paul starts with the creation, and God is responsible. He moves from that. The God that made the world and all things therein. He made everything that we have to sustain life and all that, Genesis 1. And he obviously, since that's the kind of God he is, he could not be limited to dwell in what? Temples made with hands. Neither is he served by men's hands as though he needed anything, because it's God himself who gives to all. David mentioned part of it in his prayer. Life and breath. The very air we breathe. Life, breath, and all things. The very idea of the atmospheric conditions with nitrogen and oxygen and all that goes together to make air breathable and to sustain life. And then the photosynthesis processes in plants that take carbon dioxide and then release oxygen. All of that. And people think that just kind of randomly happened. There is just, when you start to think about the details of our earth and how everything goes together in such a wonderfully designed way, there is absolutely no valid explanation except the fact that there was a divine, powerful, wise hand behind it. And so Paul talks about that. It's interesting that he talks about that down through verse 25. And then he kind of segues into the idea that not only did he make all things for life, then he talked about us. He made of one, that would be Adam, every what? Every nation. All of us came from one person, Adam. And he's interested in us. He determined the appointed seasons and the bounds of their habitation, the limitations that we can go. And he did all of this with a purpose in mind. Verse 27, that people should what? Should seek him. Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes that God has set what in our heart? Eternity in our hearts. And that there is something that we ought to look toward that God put here for us. And he put enough evidence, he gave enough evidences that we ought to see that surely there's got to be more than just random chance to put it together. That they should seek God, if haply they might feel after him. And then he made a point that would counter the Epicureans, and really as well as the Stoics, and that is, though God is not very what from us. He's not far from each one of us. And then for in him we live, move, and have our beings. Then he segues into another idea. As certain even of your poets have said, we are also his offspring. We carry, if you please, some of the DNA. We have parts of us that are like God, an eternal part of us. And even so, Artemis, I believe it was, not Artemis, I've got it in the notes, had said we are all the offspring of this. God made us of one. And so that being the case, he argues, we ought not to think that the one who would make us, that the Godhead is likened to gold or silver or stone, graven by art and device of man. Times of this kind of ignorance, God did what? He winked at, he overlooked. But now, he commands all men everywhere to repent. Now, he's given us a reason why we should. He's given us a reason why we should repent, and that is because he has ordained a day in which he will judge the world in what? Righteousness. That is, there's a standard that he's going to use to judge all people. And it's by Jesus Christ, the gospel. And so he's going to judge all men by the man whom he hath ordained. And wow, he then underpins all this. The underpinnings are that inasmuch as he has given assurance unto all men, in that he hath raised him from the dead. So he moves from the God that made the world all the way down to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Does that sound kind of like Peter's sermon in Acts 2? Yeah, let all the house of Israel know surely God made that same Jesus you crucified, Lord and Christ. He's at God's right hand. He was raised from the dead. They end at the same place. Peter was talking with Jews who knew the Scripture, Paul is talking with pagans who don't know anything, but don't even know anybody. But he starts with God and reasons forward until he gets to Christ, and then the resurrection begins, or is the foundational proof of everything. Remember in Romans 1:4, Paul said that God declared him to be his son through the resurrection of the dead. So that's kind of like that. Now, I wanted to go look at a few pictures here. Here's a picture of the Acropolis, which would be in the background, this area with the Parthenon located on the center top. Athens circled the base. All this area would have been ancient Athens. This photo taken from the Areopagus, and a person can see the Stoa of Attalus, the right center over here. The ancient agora, or the marketplace, spread out to the left. It would have been in this area right in here. Again, this was taken from Mars Hill, or the Areopagus. Here's Attalus, the king of Pergamum, first built the Stoa, consisted of 2 stories, 385 feet long, housed 21 shops on each floor, where the Athenians met, talked, and carried on business. And it would have been considered a part of the agora, or the marketplace. And of course, this is a reconstruction of it. And here are steps going up to Mars Hill. The word Areopagus means the rock of Ares. Ares is the Greek god of war. Pagus is rock. So the word Areopagus is used both with reference to the ruling council of Athens, as well as the place where the council met. This photo shows the steps leading up to the Areopagus, also called Mars Hill. Mars was the Roman god of war. Isn't it interesting? This is from a picture Brother Jenkins took. Isn't it interesting, in the Bible you can go to these places and you can see ruins, but all these places, you go to the Book of Mormon and places that it's fabricated. Here again, the steps leading up to it. Photo of the Areopagus taken from near the Parthenon. And here's constructed with 8 Doric columns in front and rear. Inside stood a 34 feet high statue of Athena, made of wood with ivory addition and gold plated. Paul could have had this, as well as others, in mind when he said, I perceive that in all things you're very religious. As I passed along, I saw the altar with the inscription to the unknown God. So he goes from one God, the creator of all, to the one origin of, he made of one blood all men of all nations who dwell. Then he deduces from that, there's one writ that they should seek God, lest haply they drove after him to find him. One brotherhood, one salvation, one judgment. And so the oneness of the gospel was distinct from every brand of religion at Athens. I wanted to try to make a chart that contrasted the two ideas. The Epicureans were founded by Epicurus, who lived around this time, 341 to 270. And if you summarize some of the salient points, they taught that the world was formed by chance. If there were gods involved, they were not involved with us, or not involved with us now. And that pleasure and happiness are the chief purposes of life. Those are the greatest good, because there's absolutely nothing for us after death. So sensual nature against the gospel, and the idea of eat, drink, and be merry. You only go around once in life. But Paul's speech countered all of that. When Paul said, the God that made the world and all things therein, he being Lord of heaven and earth. Well, they had various gods over the sea and over the planets, but he's over heaven as well as earth. And he's not limited to handmade temples. He's not served by men's hands. And he made of one every nation of men to dwell, not by chance, but by design. He determined the appointed seasons, the bounds of their habitation, the providential rule in their lives. And so all of that is countered by the gospel. And then their salient point, if God's if there were gods, they're not involved with us. Well, he says he's not very far from each one of us. And he gives us life and breath and all things, that determines seasons. And that giving life should lead people to seek God. And whereas pleasure, happiness, chief purposes of life, the greatest good, then Paul says, no, that might come, but your primary emphasis is to do righteousness, be righteous, because God will judge the world in righteousness by Jesus Christ. So hence the need to repent. And whereas the Epicureans would believe that there was nothing after death, then Paul said that he's given assurance. God has given assurance unto all men, and that he has raised Jesus from the dead. Hence there is life after death. So the gospel obviously countered the Epicureans. Comment or question? Anybody?
That same sermon that he preached then, although it was to the people in Athens, it's just as accurate today.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
verse 27 gives so much hope, because it says, because we, at least it does to me, that they should, the Lord is seekable.
Yes.
And that gives us hope, because we can find him.
Yes.
It is possible.
It's possible. Yeah.
And he's not that far away as the devil would want us to believe,
Yes.
or the world would want us to believe. He's out of reach. He's out of hope. You cannot get there. And he is so far above and higher than we are, but yet he made that way through Christ.
Yes.
That we can get
Yes,
to him.
great point. That's exactly right, Patty. He's not very far from each one of us.
And that's so comforting and so helpful,
yes.
because it just gives you the wheel to keep on keeping on, because when you think the other way, it tends to weaken your faith and you might give up. But when you look at it through that verse in 27,
Yes.
it just gives you all kind of perseverance.
Oh, it does. You're exactly right. And you know, he really didn't go, I mean, Luke doesn't record any of his teaching about the life of Jesus. And the life of Jesus really shows what you're talking about, that God is touchable. That God is seekable. I mean, is that a good word?
I know, I think I've used it too, but it sounds good.
Everybody knows what you mean. He's seekable and he's findable. And Jesus' life on earth is that demonstration, like we've quoted so many times in John 1:18. You know, no man has seen God at any time, the only begotten of the Father, full of grace. He hath revealed him, declared him, exhibited him. And so here's Jesus on earth, and that's God condescending in human form for us to come to him. You're exactly right about all that.
See, because too, also to me, you know, the distance that sin you feel when you
Yeah.
sin, how far you go from God,
Yes.
how horrible it makes you feel.
Yes.
And like I said, and sometimes you may even feel, which is the devil wanting you to feel that way, that you can't ever get back to that other place where there is hope and where he is
Yes.
tangible. And that's why, you know, I always want to hold on to that hope and comfort and let that have the precedence to make that right. to
Yes.
have that back again and not remain in that other state. Because if you remain in sin, I can't repair, you can't repair without the blood of Christ, but with him I can.
Yes.
I can get back to that former.
That exactly right. You know, this kind of philosophy, right here, the pleasure, happiness, the chief purpose, that's the greatest good, because there's nothing after the grave. It ends up being a hopelessness unless you just enjoy the, you know, just sensual, whatever pleasures you have. Go after it now, because that's all you're going to have.
It makes you wonder how people can live their life without God,
yeah,
with no purpose.
yeah, yes, you're exactly right.
And you know, Philip, also, God is not some mystical thing that people try to make him to be. We have to see Satan in all of this, even in the philosopher minds.
Yes.
From the beginning, even with Adam and Eve, his purpose was to separate man from God.
Mhm.
And he has done this all through scripture.
You've done a good job of it.
Yeah, he has tried to separate, but God's ultimate plan and his purpose
Yeah,
is succeeded
yeah.
through his son. Even though Satan tried to, do
Yes.
all of these things.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
It's on a little different note, but I was thinking about that passage there when he talks about he's not limited to handmade temples. That's the very thing that Solomon said
Yes.
in 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 18, at the dedication of the temple.
Yes.
That if heaven and earth can't contain,
How can this temple?
How can this
Yes,
temple?
exactly.
This is not a new idea for those who view Jehovah.
Yes.
But these people didn't.
They didn't.
And they did spend all their time.
Well,
Their whole lives were focused around this type of worship. I mean, it got into everything they did.
yes, yeah, like we were talking the other day.
Like Catholicism
Mm-hmm.
has been in the past involved in practically every aspect of life.
Yes. All of you make outstanding points on this. In fact, I don't have anything to add really.
Where did she say, where did it say that was the second Chronicles?
Yeah, 2 Chronicles 6, isn't it?
Verse 18.
6:18, Solomon's dedicatorial speech and prayer there at in the temple. I'll tell you what, just to read a great speech is Solomon's speech there. That is wonderful. Let's go back to the Stoics for just a moment. The Stoics claimed Zeno as founder and received the name from the place where he taught of the Stoa, or portico in Athens. And the Stoics believed there were many gods in their thinking. God of reason gave the universal order, so men should live consistently with nature, since it is God. Held to a little higher morality than the Epicureans, and stressed man should not be guided either by pleasure or pain. Hence, Stoicism. We get that. One unremoved by outward circumstances, conforming his life to nature's will, reaches the perfection of virtue. But then that would lead to spiritual pride and self-sufficiency, or if people failed, suicide. And there again, the thing in common with the Epicureans, there's no future resurrected body. So we come back that here's God, made of one. God's the maker of all, versus pantheistic, many gods, and one God gave the universe order, and we are basically just a part of, evolution teaches that you're just a higher link in an evolutionary chain, rather than we were made in the image and after the likeness of God. We're made from the earth. God took the dust of the earth and formed man and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. So our bodies are formed from, obviously, the elements, but there's a part of us that is differentiated from the earth. That's the spiritual part of us. And, of course, the Stoics would not have that. Held to higher morality stress. And on that score, again, he's not far from each of us. He gives us life, breath, and all things. He determined our seasons. One unmoved by outward circumstances. That's what people ought to be. But Paul said, weep with those that weep, rejoice with them that rejoice. And all the same points that he made really counter the Stoics as well as the Epicureans. Okay.
Philip,
Yes.
Was Zeno what they call a Hellenistic Greek, if I'm pronouncing?
Yeah, Hellenistic. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was
They were
a
Greek
Hellenistic
philosophers.
Greek philosopher.
Mm-hmm. One thing I was thinking about, and I brought McGarvey on, actually, I was talking about reading a portion of. One thing that is common for us that was common for them they were trying to think kind of outside themselves and what is life about? What is the greatest good? When you come to, well, here I am, what's the purpose of life? And they had, and when you look at just, if you divorce God and divorce His Word from your thinking, then you've got all of these various angles that come at you or that you can explore. And the highest good that you can possibly achieve is several steps below what the revelation of God's will would be. If you could come up with some kind of philosophy that would be the greatest good for the greatest number of people, you still have nothing to base it on except your own thinking. And so hence, we need direction. Jeremiah 10:23. Oh Lord, I know that the way of man is not what?
In himself.
In himself. It is not in man that walks to direct his own step. We simply cannot come up with unaided by divine revelation in the Word. We cannot come up with a system that comes even close to what the gospel. Brother Gene, you wanted to say something?
It's easy to see from looking at Genesis, the first 6 chapters, that mankind left to themselves, there's only one course.
Yes.
It's a decreasing curve.
Yes.
And, here's a point: God made man altogether upright, but He has sought out many inventions. Well, 2,000 years, maybe 1,600 years, the only thought of their heart was only evil continually.
Yeah.
And so one little group, eight people,
Made it.
God thought worthy to
say.
keep alive. And Paul said, 1 Corinthians 15, 32, if the dead are not raised, let us eat, drink, for tomorrow we die.
Yes.
That's the Epicurean
Yes, exactly.
philosophy right there. If there's nothing else,
Why not? Just seek do the best we can.
that's what you see going on in the world.
Exactly right.
Yeah, if people are miserable, there's
Yeah.
nothing, you can't work yourself to be wonderful. You can't
Yeah.
hate yourself to be wonderful. You
Yeah.
can't eat enough or drink enough or, Solomon, in Ecclesiastes, he did everything.
Yes.
He did everything, being the wisest man that ever lived, and it was all vanity, striving after the wind.
Yes.
And what little bit a man can do is enjoy the fruit of his hands.
Yes. That's exactly right. Great point. Great point. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Would this same, what Gina said, would this same mindset have been in Noah's son Ham in the building of that tower? Are they building that with
Well,
hand
it would have been down the line from Ham and
From
Canaan.
Ham.
Yeah, it would have been a little ways down the line.
Okay.
Probably a few hundred years, actually.
Okay.
But I couldn't help but think, as we've been talking about this, Romans 1, is really the New Testament passage that shows where man goes without God. And all of the kinds of sins he involves himself in is what we see in our American culture. It doesn't matter if it's in highly paid athletes with covenant breakers. It doesn't matter if it's with the Hollywood left and lesbianism and homosexuality. Whatever it is that people, when a standard of righteousness is abdicated, then what you do is you just go to whatever feels good. And the only limitations that you have are what you can't do yourself. Not that there's some objective standard that I feel like I need to be accountable to, or some ultimate being who's going to judge me, and so I want to please that ultimate being. No, if that's not there, it's just whatever you want to do.
Yeah, you made the point a while ago that the higher acme of the Greek culture was Alexander the Great,
Yeah.
and this is 500 years later, and
Yes.
that's as far as they got, is worshiping a bunch of rocks.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, 500 years later, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think about things like this, and I know you do too, that we are so blessed to have in our hands a record of divine revelation to man. And I think so many people don't appreciate, even some who claim to be Christians, don't appreciate what we really have and what the wonderful guidance and all of the blessings it gives us. Brother Gene's made the point numerous times also, where that you just look at where the gospel has not gone, where the Word of God has not gone in cultures, and what they are versus where there's at least a modicum of respect for God and His Word in some places. It's the difference in daylight and dark just in the culture. Just in the culture. Yeah, Lee, you will say something? Okay, we better stop and, Lord willing, pick up on Sunday with where we